goes without saying, thank you, Martin, for providing the opportunity for hosting me today. It's a great pleasure, and I've been following Projecting Success for some years to see how the evolution of your thinking and your teams has gone through. So great to try to finally find those connection points and to understand what the interlink is between the plans that you're making and the market that's developing and where the National Digital Twin sits. So I think it's a great opportunity. As a quick overview, I won't do the sales pitch. Suffice it to say that I wear a few hats. And these days, one of the biggest hats I've got is working with University of Cambridge under the guise of a stream lead for one of the primary streams of something called the National Digital Twin Programme. And we'll get into that obviously in some detail. Some small background, I've worked with Sellafield looking at their digital CapEx improvement program and how to embed 21st century tools into their major projects. I've worked with the World Economic Forum looking at emerging technologies and how they impact and have implications in terms of their commercial routes or the impact on social environments or corporate operations. And I've worked with the Energy Technologies Institute looking at the financial and economic viability of new assets in the energy sector as well. So I get around a little bit. The work with Cambridge has got to be one of the most taxing aspects of my career. It's enormous in its scope, and the implications if carried out fully are significant to you and I as well as to businesses and the infrastructure that it supports. So I'm happy to take more questions about me later on, but I'm fundamentally boring when compared to the topic at hand. The question I think I'm answering today, and tell me if I'm wrong, and if I am, this changes everything because the rest of my presentation follows from here, is what is a digital twin? What exactly is the National Digital Twin Programme? Because I think the context is important. And how does this relate to project delivery? So if a little bit like marriage vows, if anybody thinks I'm way off the mark, speak now or forever hold your peace, I think. And we seem to be good. That's fantastic.
That's perfect, James. Thank you. Spot on.
No problem at all. I think it was with real pleasure that I looked at the demographics that came through on Mentimeter, actually seeing the broad spread of different participants in terms of sectors and interests and backgrounds. I do apologize to those who are data scientists or information management professionals. I will be able to talk to some degree about what we're doing, but if you start interrogating me about fourth dimensional progressive ontological basis for what we're doing, I may struggle, but I'll do my darndest. So hopefully today, this is a fairly accessible presentation. It starts at basics, it explores some different concepts and ideas. It doesn't get down into the reeds too much. So please elevate me or make me go down as we go along. This is flexible. I like to start with this with some of my presentations whenever we're talking about technology, and some of you may know Ray Kurzweil already. So he's a famous futurist and has been around on the scene, a modern day technological Nostradamus that takes a fairly informed view about where we might be in the future. And he's advised NASA, he's advised the UK government, he's advised UKRI before about where things might go. And his estimates that he came out with, I think a couple of years ago now, his latest iterations about what the future will hold. See that in 100 years, that $1,000 will buy you a computer which is 1 billion times more intelligent than every human being combined. And you can imagine how that might work. You know, Moore's law and all the rest of that says that an exponential growth yearly or a doubling, if you like, yearly of computing power is well within range. And in fact, we're already pressing those boundaries now. So I can believe that. The next stage, machines have attained equal legal status with humans, and the legal ramifications of human-robot interfaces and whatnot are something that we're dealing with right now. So what you call a machine, I suppose, might change, but fundamentally, the legal problems that we're facing now are that incarnate. And then the last one, which is a stretch, is that artificial intelligence will create super powerful planet-sized computers throughout the universe. I struggle with that one, but you get the gist, right? So all of this is looking at data-centric future scenarios, and that, as everyone on here will be well aware, will manifestly change the fabric of how we work and live. And I put a little pithy note there, and about halfway through that timeline, between now and 100 years, HS2 will open its station in Leeds. So there's a disconnect between our ambitions and the way that we're delivering things now, and our assumption that we'll continue on in the same manner at the same pace of technological advancement, compared with how the future may actually pan out if Ray Kurzweil sees his future evolve. Materially different disconnects. So either we strive for that big, massive, great interstellar, floating structures in the sky sort of future, or we sit back on our laurels and run with the same old project controls we always have, and that's not, in my book, the right approach. A quick primer for you on digital twins, for those of you who don't know, join the club. I don't think we've got a firm handle on it yet. The term doesn't have a formal definition. BSI is struggling with it. The National Digital Twin is struggling with it. But there are some basic tenets which always hold true. And that seems to be that it's the reciprocal relationship between the real asset, so a physical piece of infrastructure, or doesn't have to be an asset, as Martin pointed out. It could be coronavirus, for example, and its digital equivalent. So that's, if you like, a constant interaction between a digital version, a digital simulation, and the real world asset, and the two should reciprocally inform and influence each other. So when something changes in one area, it changes in the equivalent over the other side of the fence. They can be paired together through things like sensors, feedback systems, and other technologies, and that depends on the type of asset that you're governing. But it should be used to significantly and sustainably reduce the owner's exposure to operational and commercial risk. We're not doing it because we like technology. We're doing it because at the end of the day, it needs to affect the real world and drive benefit, either to organizations, to society, to governmental economics. However you want to look at it, the digital twins must accomplish an impact in the real world. And everyone seems to be, including Gartner, is expected to be as disruptive to the world as driverless cars are expected to be as well. And I hope you agree that that seems feasible. Okay, some examples maybe, and question whether they are digital twins, I suppose. So smart meters are a great example. They sit in our homes. They are a simulated feedback mechanism about the real world heating and electrical conditions of your house. They go straight back to your utility company, who uses that to simulate maybe the impact of different tariffs that it may have on you, or system resilience, the ability for the grid to continue to service the level of demand that it's hitting, that sort of thing. It's a direct feedback mechanism from the real world to a simulated one. Remote asset management systems are already commonplace. Formula One telematics, those guys have really got it going on. Wind farms are already using digital twins. They actively change the pitch of the turbines. They actively change the operating conditions of those assets in real time, sometimes in an automated sense. And that's where a lot of the software-based development of digital twin platforms is being driven from. Smart motorway networks, as annoying as they are digital twins to a degree. And COVID response. So nice to see those 4 people from the healthcare sector today. We've been working with the Joint Biosecurity Council most recently, looking at how digital twins are being used right now to manage COVID response. So there's the real world implications and the changing nature of COVID, people who are getting tested, who are feeding back that data into a central repository, and that system is running simulations about how things may pan out in the future, and then government policy is informed as a result. So digital twins are out there right now affecting our lives. A useful example straight off the bat. So Exelon it has been using digital twins for a while. Whether this example is a digital twin or not, I think is debatable, but predictive analytics is a great application, right? So you've got real world data coming from real world assets rather being fed in to a system which is forecasting different scenarios about how that asset might change in the future. So might it break down? Might the corrosion accelerate because of the conditions outside? Exelon used it. They saved, they reckon, $500,000 in avoided faults. Doesn't sound like much, but I'm sure that's a net positive return on the investment they put into it, and estimated an additional $700,000 worth of saved fees and overtime. So that's individual digital twins. Whether that's a single asset or a single component within an asset, but our built environment is pretty complicated, right? There's lots of different things that we could sensorize. IoT is going to change the world, we've been told. So we're going to have everything from hospitals to transport to schools, universities, anything. We're giving off data all the time, and we need to do something with that. We need to be clear about how we manage it. And the built environment, as we look at it, is made out of the economic infrastructure, so the physical things like transport networks, like our energy generating assets, petro and pharmaceutical infrastructure assets. The social infrastructure, which is the construction sector as part of it as well, I suppose, and they are the hospitals and the tax offices, if you like. And then there's the natural environment, the green environment that underpins it all. And that is an environment, because that is an asset, because without it, things like flood risks are materially increased. Ecology suffers. It is a tangible asset that needs to be managed as part of the holistic system. Okay, so there's a single digital twin, a physical talking to the digital equivalent. And that's what happens when we start linking everything together. So, you know, transport and energy, if you look at electric vehicles at the moment, yeah, that's a big nexus point, right? So you've got electric vehicles demanding electricity from the grid. The grid is trying to manage itself consistently on a real-time basis, and so is transport. But they don't share data particularly well. So we should probably look to do more of that. And the same with water as well. So water and energy are interlinked. Water and transport are interlinked. Petrochemical and pharmaceuticals are interlinked altogether as well. So it's a massive system of interlinked data sharing. And we don't at the moment have any way of getting that to share equitably, consistently and confidently. So there was a report released, sorry, I'm trying to rattle through these, but I know I'm taking time at the same time. There's a report released back in 2018 from the National Infrastructure Commission called Data for the Public Good, that said that we as a nation really need to get a grip with this, the idea that we've got huge amounts of data and it's burgeoning every single year, and we are not utilizing it to the benefit of society. We might be doing it on a point-to-point basis to benefit organizations, but we're not doing it to benefit society, either in an economic sense or in the social outcome sense. So they said, 3 recommendations. You need something called a national digital twin, an ability to link together this great ecosystem of different parts and digital representations of the real. You need a framework, something that's going to link all these things together with a common foundation, a common language, so that when the Highways Agency tries to talk with National Grid, that they're not talking a completely different language and somebody has to sit in the middle and arbitrate that relationship. It shouldn't look like that. It should be seamless. And you should have a digital framework task group. You should have a group of governance organizations there to help guide it all, who are informed and represent asset owners and the private sector and research and development institutions and the public. So government said, what a good idea. And they baked it into our policy landscape. So in our industrial strategy, they defined the need for it. In the Transforming Infrastructure and Performance reports from the IPA, they enshrined it further. And in last year's, or this year's rather, National Infrastructure Strategy, November last year, I think it came out, it was explicitly mentioned as well. And that explicit mention was for the need for something called the National Digital Twin Programme. And at the moment, that lives in something called the Centre for Digital Built Britain, which is a partnership between Bayes and the University of Cambridge. And it acts as a convener for a lot of industries and a lot of industrial partnerships coming together to figure out how digital and infrastructure in the environment all comes together. What are the strategies? What are the policies? They set out the roadmap for how we're going to go. And at the moment, they're the home for UK BIM. So all the stuff you've seen about PAS 1192 and the BIM framework coming through, that's Centre for Digital Built Britain. It's intended to help build national capability, inform government policy, support the national change, and it also homes, as I say, the national digital twin. If we look at the life cycle as a continuum which it is obviously, from design right the way through build, operate, and integrate, digital twins and their application in the national sense sit pretty much on the right-hand side. So Martin's not wrong when he says, I don't fully see the relationship between the construction side of things, project delivery, and the national digital twin, because if you see it sits later on. It's more about operational asset efficacy and resilience than it is about construction and project delivery. But the two will interlink. If you can imagine that in order to get to the end state of the national digital twin, everything needs to be building and accreting along that pathway. So the end state, if you like, needs to be clearer, and the national digital twin is hoping to create that clear vision of the end state. We'll get into that in more detail, but hopefully that helps to show you whereabouts the NDT and digital twins in general tend to sit. It's in operate and integrate rather than in design and build, although there's a massive implication, and it's a circular process. Governance. So CDBB on the right, and we've got a very strong relationship with the Infrastructure Clients Group, which represents a lot of the asset owners that you'll all be familiar with working with. And there you go. So there's a lot of acronyms there, many of which will be familiar to you. But the big, I suppose the three that I'm most keen to point out is on CDBB's side, the one up and one down from it, the Manufacturing Technologies Council and the Construction Innovation Hub are core partnerships. So CDBB, Manufacturing Technology Council and Construction Innovation Hub are as one. You know, they are all working together very closely to look at the futures for BIM, for construction, for modular design, for the National Digital Twin. It's all coming together. So we're not separating these out and suggesting that there isn't a relationship. I think I'll leave this for now. This is more that in the National Infrastructure Strategy, there was an interesting point which we might come back to, which is on a cost benchmarking hub recommendation that came from it. Some of you will have seen that already. Martin, I'm sure you will have done. It'll be interesting to pick up on what the implications are for that. For us, that seemed really exciting. Benefits of the National Digital Twin. Very quickly, it's supposed to benefit society, as I say. It's supposed to benefit the economy. It's supposed to benefit business, because if it doesn't, again, we're missing the trick. And one of the most interesting aspects of that third point is its ability to enable new business models, primary and secondary markets that spin out from the availability of open data, and common rules and protocols that help govern how data gets shared. At no point is the National Digital Twin trying to be a marketplace or trying to be a product or even a service. It's just a backbone. It's a set of rules and tools to enable others to use open data more effectively. That's fundamentally it. We've made good progress. So we've got some generic principles for how data should be looked at and how digital twins should be rolled out. We've got a roadmap looking at how we deploy national digital twins into the future. We've got a pathway document which talks about all the different steps we want to take to get there. And we've got something called the Digital Twin Hub, which some of you may be members of already. If you're not, I think it would be wonderful to take a look if you're interested. And it's simply, it's a convening space for a lot of different case studies, for challenges, for cross-sectoral dialogue and international dialogue these days as well, as at the start of this year.
I would recommend that as well. So I've had a look at that. I've got weekly meetings as well. Every Tuesday at 10:30 is a weekly meeting that's well worth tuning into if you've got a bit of time. They do video it as well, so you can watch it back at your own convenience. So if this is your thing, it's definitely worth dialing into those sessions and joining the hub. Yeah, great.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, thank you, and all welcome. And vice versa, there may be some real call for the reciprocal to happen, where we're asking people on the CDBB side of things to be more cognizant of what's going on here in Projecting Success's arena too. So I'm sure we can do a meet and share. I'm trying to motor through this. I apologize if this is too quick. Some organizations that are working with us to pioneer the idea of a foundation data model, a basis for sharing information together. So Sellafield are in there, Greater London Authority, Anglian Water, Heathrow Highways and Northumbrian Water. And they're all working together to see whether this thing that we're trying to create, this something called the Information Management Framework, would allow them to share information with each other more comfortably and more cohesively. It's early days yet, and there is some ways to go, at least 18 to 24 months before we've got something tangible. I think this is where it starts to get a little bit more accessible and less about Cambridgey stuff. So hopefully that's a good overview about what the National Digital Twin Programme is. I think some of the challenges which are about digital twins in general, not just the National Digital Twin Project, is that, and I hope you agree, it is not fundamentally a technical challenge. There are standards we need to look at. There are ways of managing data that we can improve upon, but that's not out with our ability to control, and the technology exists. Maybe there are some platforms we need to develop and create to help with that, but that's just an efficiency. Fundamentally, we know how to manage data. We just need to do it. But these other things, these other enabling areas, the legal amount, way we manage digital twins, because you've got a real asset interacting with the digital, making automated decisions all the time. That's a concern. The ethical implications of having automated systems making decisions on our behalf, the financial implications about how you generate an ROI from this sort of thing, security and social are obvious ones as well. So how do you protect data when it starts to aggregate at the scale that we're talking about, and how does the social impact actually manifest itself? These are the fundamental challenges that I think our program, and also your program, is trying to deal with. The availability is one thing of the data. How you manage it, control it, to make sure it's safe, secure, resilient, and curated properly is a real challenge. To try to hone in a few deep dives, there's 3 deep dives I'll explore very quickly. Like I say, there's not technological challenges we're facing. These are 3 big hitters that are in a different area that we need to focus on. Organizational readiness is a huge one, and skills. The digital artifact and the legal implications of data, and investor and insurance readiness. And that last one, I think, might impact and is where we see the relationship between project delivery and DTs most keenly. So as a quick deep dive, this is interesting because I can't see some of it because Martin's face is covering it. Let's see if I can move that out of the way. There we go. It won't come as any surprise to you to know that data and information management skills, data science, is a skill that's in huge demand in the market, and we're not alone in the UK. Internationally, this is a massive issue. And there is going to be a significant bottleneck in our ability to make change within data and digital spaces because we don't have those people to move around. For those 4 of you who have joined from the data and information management background, your salaries are going to rocket. So I'm in the wrong career. Well done. You're on the right side of the supply and demand curve. But that creates a problem for organizational change because that is a massive bottleneck, and the intelligent customer role, the confidence that an organization might have, whether they're an owner operator or a developer or a consultancy, to go out there and start adopting digital twins because they think it might make an organizational or financial benefit, is going to be severely curtailed. Because even if it makes a lot of financial sense, if the risk profile to organizations who are owning it is too great, if the ability for them to control it through life isn't there, it just can't happen. It's a logistical bottleneck more than a technological one. And that really impacts the business case significantly. As one addendum, which I'll throw out there, is how organizations from a business case point of view value data. And this, I think, Martin will play a lot to projecting success's point, is that data, managed by digital twin or otherwise, has intrinsic value. It's got value when it's applied more than it has value just sitting on its own, but it has a tradable value as a commodity in its own right. There's somebody who will need and want that data. So how do you put a tangible value on that? And does that support a business case? And that's an important point to note. I could talk forever about that. I won't do. The second deep dive, the legal implications. There's already been a court case that happened a few years ago. Good friends at Mark McDonald fell foul of this with Trant, and many of you will be aware of this already, in that CDEs, the common data environment in this case, so it's more on the BIM side of things than digital twins, wasn't properly covered by legal precedent. Nobody had really looked at it from a commercial point of view. So when something went wrong contractually in the project delivery phase, and the client said, "I want my CDE," and Mark McDonald turned around and said, "No thanks, that's our CDE, it's our property until we hand it over to you," that created a furore of a court case. And to be honest, we need more of them because we don't have the legal precedent at the moment to govern the way that digital twins will evolve. There's a lot of legal work that will need to go into establishing what the precedents are, what the contract law needs to look like, and what the in-house counsel of these big owner operators and developers needs to understand if we're going to try to trot out digital twins in any greater sense. Ambiguity is the biggest killer, isn't it? So it's less about conflict, it's more about people not knowing where they stand and what their responsibilities are. And finally, the challenges, finance, insurance, and risk. One of my babies, which I'm really keen on, and key to the project delivery side of things. Weighted average cost of capital for projects is significantly impacted by risk perceptions. The idea is that a digital twin, and certainly a national digital twin, should be able to reduce that perception of risk because we'll have far greater control over the way that the asset is operated. Feedback mechanisms, early warning signs, our ability to automate decision making, so we're not waiting for some half-drunk operator somewhere to make a decision on the fly, which is unfair to operators. I apologize for that, but you get the idea. It de-risks a lot of that process if we've got the proper controls and governance in place. And investors are starting to wake up to that. And right now, there are some insurance companies who will reduce premiums if you're using BIM or if you're using IoT technology. You can see this already in insurance with telematics for our wayward teenage sons and daughters who might be driving cars, and the insurance company says, "Hey, if you put the black box in there, we'll reduce your premiums because we'll be able to see if you've been compliant with the speed limits, so you're not driving after 11 o'clock at night. That's a digital twin. It's the physical car showing, in a digital sense, that feedback mechanism, and their premiums will go up if they get it wrong, if they go on the wrong side of it. So more of that will happen. There are already insurance policies, as I say, that take into account things like falling from height digital twins, early warning systems for asset failure. That will happen more and more. So underwriting aside, WACC should come down if we can demonstrate that digital twins are helping with the efficiency of asset operations. Lower WACCs equals greater liquidity of investments, which equals more project pipelines, more confidence in investment, and then more infrastructure in the UK, which equates usually to better economic outcomes and growth, is the idea. Anyway, what we need to do more at this stage is to look at what the implications are. So how do you draw a really causal line between a national digital twin governing assets at a system level and increased liquidity at the investment side of the argument? That's an interesting one, and we're working on that at the moment as part of the program. Just a quick one showing you the changing priorities of investors and insurers. This was a KPMG report, I think. Boo hiss. But it shows you a series of different insurers and investors. What is their priority? What is their focus? And you can see that defining digital is high on their agenda, but harnessing the power of data is low, because they don't understand it. They don't yet have their heads around at a holistic level what it means for them. So you can see the opportunity. If their understanding of digital improves, then their ability to harness that data to do things about improving the way that they invest and improving the way that they underwrite improves commensurately. So we should be helping that. As project delivery guys, as organizations that own assets, we should be helping to inform the investors and underwriters on the nature of how we reduce risk because of data and because of things like digital twins. In the interest of time, let me just see. How are we doing for time, Martin? Sorry. I am...
You got another half an hour, 40 minutes?
Oh, we're all right then. Yeah. Settle down, guys. Right, get comfy. So I'll touch briefly on this then. Some of you will be familiar already with Equinor. Who do we are going? What did they used to be called? Help me out here, guys. Anybody who used to know who were... Oh, Statoil. There we go. I've written it for my own slides. Previously Statoil. So this isn't digital twin related. This is about the value of open data and how an economic imperative can overrule a concern about the return on investment for that data. So back in 2018, Equinor had finished with the Volve oil field. It was now into decommissioning. And they had a huge amount of data, an enormous amount of data from its entire lifetime of operations. And this was at the point in 2018, as some of you will be aware, that the oil price was tanking, the whole sector was failing. And they wanted to generate, they thought that their role in all of this in the North Sea could be to help generate more interest, to get people out there investing in North Sea assets, the next generation, if you like, of offshore assets and investment. You might sit on the other side of the net zero divide on that one and say that that's not a good thing, but that's what they were after. And they thought a good way of doing that would be to release all of that data completely openly, with very few caveats about its end use, and to see if that would generate some research, some other people picking up that data and investing in it, and the good of the whole industry could then be supported by that. So whilst Volve might lose any sort of IP or control over its proprietary data, the whole industry will benefit, which in the end comes back to Volve. And that's the level of altruism we're hoping to establish on the National Digital Twin Programme, the idea that organizations will willingly open up data boundaries and data silos, commit to a single backbone of how that data gets shared, which will then allow us to do things like start sharing data more openly, create data marts, create data trusts more easily, all on a very common sharing backbone to allow those things to scale very quickly. And Volve had exactly that idea back in 2018. And you can still, to this day, log on to their website and download 5 gigabytes worth of Volve data, if you so wish to. It's a boon for geospatial guys, because there's a lot of that. Sorry, 5 gigabytes, 5 terabytes, apologies. You might need to buy a new laptop. So final 2 slides, and it's taken me this long to get to the implications on project delivery. And apologies, they are fairly pithy in that, and I've got to move my thing again. The fundamental impact is that as digital twins and as the national digital twin increases in its cascade through the built environment, the overall liquidity and viability of projects will increase because investors, developers, asset owners will be clearer about the value they'll get out of their asset and what efficiencies they can get. And their level of confidence in how they can control it as well. They'll also be able to start talking with each other, sort of interlinking things. So as I said before, things like the energy sector talking with the water sector about how joint investment might make the entire energy and water sectors more resilient to climate change is a great example. And I've got onto that. As a nation, we really do need to be thinking about assets from a systems level perspective. If we keep on looking at it on a unitary single asset by single asset perspective, we won't get the economies of scale we need to make the economic goals that we've set work. The NDT may also drive a greater need for project data to interact and integrate across organizational asset class boundaries. So in the case of HS2 data, for example, with HS2, and there may be some of you guys on there from project controls and delivery for HS2, there is a need for HS2 to share its project delivery data with Highways England, with the Environment Agency, with Land Registry. There's all these other government and non-government departments that need the data from HS2 to make their own decision making in terms of how they plan the routes. That'll happen increasingly, and the way that you structure your project data, the taxonomies and ontologies and the other ways that the things feed together and link together, will need to commonalize, because that interaction will get broader and broader. And the last thing you need is for your project team to be creating project data, cost forecasts, baselines, sending them off to somebody, and that government department saying, I'm terribly sorry, I can't read any of that. I'm going to have to spend 3 months trying to decode your project structures. It needs to be machine readable at the point of transfer, not needing that mapping exercise to happen. So that's the implication with digital twins, the national digital twin, and project delivery. It needs to start looking more cohesive in terms of how the data is structured. Some key takeaways, maybe. There's lots more I could talk about. Digital twins are an enabling technology, but they do not create value just by the very virtue of their existence. Digital twins are there to solve the need for a different outcome. So either more control or greater confidence in data, or whatever it is. Digital twins need to be there to solve a problem, not just because we can do them. The UK and other organisations must consider asset portfolios as a system, because we've got net zero and social development goals and economic goals to hit. Post-COVID, this is going to be a huge comeback in infrastructure, if we're clear, and we need to use everything at our disposal to make it work, but it needs to work as a system. And again, a takeaway just to sort of provide succor to those of you who are wondering what the NDT is again, it's just a framework. It's a set of tools and common approaches that we might use to unify people's thoughts on how data gets shared better, and breaking down some of the technical and socio-technical and social problems that might get in the way of that. It's not about a product. It's not a mandated process or a mandated portal even. It's just a backbone. It's a framework. And hopefully, if we get it right, then innovative business models and applications will come out from that, because we'll have a lot more open data, which everyone is very clear about how it gets shared. And again, we can have repositories and different areas where focus in on specific data can come out of. So you might have one, as you guys are developing for project delivery. You might have another one for biosecurity. You might have one for oil and gas coming out. These are secondary markets that spin out from common data sharing backbones. Thank you. Tons of other stuff I can talk about, but I think over to Q&A. And thank you, Martin, again, for indulging in my waffle.
That's great. Thank you, James. Really appreciate it. So if you've got any questions, please ping them into chat, and we'll come off mute in a bit as well once we've had a bit of a conversation going with James. So thank you, James. That was really good.
No problem.
I think a few questions in terms of the sort of digital twin and the work on project delivery. So we've got a band of brothers and sisters through the task force and through the community, and there's a lot of information in the National Digital Twin, lots of papers, loads of things going on. What do we need to do to work out, right, which bits can we leverage, which bits do we need to start from scratch with?
Yeah.
Which bit do we need to make sure we're compliant with, but we can go our own way, etc. I can't quite understand. I think a few of us are struggling with it. how do you leverage all this thing on the asset, which then influences the way you deliver it, but the National Digital Twin is not for building Britain, it's for built Britain, right? So I think we're all struggling with that. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, I am doing my darndest. That's right. So there is. I mean, you've already got through CDBB. There's already frameworks in terms of how construction might be better delivered through BIM. So BIM is great for that, right? It provides the basis for helping to commonalize construction data and construction processes. But the National Digital Twin, as you point out, is more about enabling the integration of assets once they actually exist, and that might come full circle. And then that better integration helps to plan for new projects, and so that may come around. But as it stands right now, there isn't a mature body of standards, knowledge, and frameworks and tools that I could point you at that would give you exactly what you needed to help you to do better project delivery. It's still some ways away. And I think we recognize that as a program. We've got a timeline that we still need to follow and a roadmap, which might take another 2 years to get to before we've got a really consolidated set of tools for people to use. There are basics right now available, and the data scientists among you might be interested in it. So there are. We've produced some recommendations on what are top level ontologies, and we believe an ontology is an important way of structuring data, because that's the commonality that we should be able to engender through the different asset classes and types. At the moment, I would be, I think, remiss in saying that projects should start to adopt that taxonomy or ontology. It's not appropriate. It needs to be driven from the owner operators who are commissioning the assets themselves. So our plan is to see that those approaches to the data, the information management framework, go into the owner operators first and foremost, who will then specify in their functional requirements and delivery requirements and project scoping the need for a certain type of data structure. So I don't think there's anything I would suggest right now that the project delivery community pick up and start using wholesale. It's more about keeping a really close interaction with what we're doing, and to be clear about what the implications might be further down the line. And by all means, and most clearly, to help us to say, well, hang on, this wouldn't work with project delivery, or we've got a real concern here about supply chain consistency, or when you get into really complicated project delivery models. Maybe there is one very clear relationship, and that's Project 13. So what's going on with the ICG and Project 13 has a part within it which looks at the need for integrated data systems for project delivery, and that's where the digital twin and the national digital twin implication is maybe most easily found within project delivery spheres. Does that sort of make sense? I apologize.
No, that's really good. Yeah. And a question for the non-construction people. So if we take an example of financial services, been anything which resembles a digital twin in financial services?
Yes, but it is it's a slightly more tenuous, I think. I might duck that one on the basis that if I talk about it, I'm likely to not make any sense. But for those of you who know Gavin Starks, he's definitely the right man to ask, and it may well be worth a separate conversation with Gavin, maybe inviting him to one of these sessions, I'd suggest, Martin, because he is an exemplary presenter. And Gavin has done a lot of work looking at the implications of open data in financial services and what that's meant for things over there. But I suppose I mean, hard to point at a specific example, so I'll pass on that one if I might, Martin.
Yeah. Okay, superb. There's some questions being asked as well. So I think I don't know if it's a question or a statement about the discussion about emulation versus simulation. I think Sophie raised it. Can you just touch on that? And maybe Sophie come off a mute and just kick it around with James about the discussion about emulation versus simulation. Sophie, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, it's always a struggle to find mute, isn't it? We certainly find this in our work with manufacturing companies, that they often use what they call a simulation twin plus an emulation twin, with an emulation twin being a reflection of something real. So dynamic data coming through, for example, to show you what's going on a production line. But then they will use those same data feeds to feed what they call the simulation twin, but also push synthetic data through that simulation twin so that you can start to test out potential scenarios. You can do your risk mitigation. So what happens if tooling station 5 suddenly goes slow? What does that do to the rest of the production line? And we're starting to see that in our work creep through into other sectors. So that was the point I was making, that sometimes simulation is very important. Well, clearly simulation is very important, otherwise things wouldn't get developed at all. But by being able to play between using real sources of data and then swapping in synthetic sources of data can help you to learn and help you to improve the actual physical twin that you're looking at.
Yeah. So Sophie and James, do you think, because in those environments it's basically a physics model, so it's fairly constrained, whereas in a project delivery environment you've got so many different variables there, the weather, you know, your supply chain, COVID, everything on top, that's going to be a lot more difficult to get a digital twin of that delivery process, so that emulation or simulation?
I think I might disagree with you actually on that, Martin. The beauty of the digital twins is that they aren't just statistical models, so they don't rely purely on you know, humans trying to find where the relationships lie. And I suppose you can look at things like I mean, even M-Plan, you know, which isn't a digital twin, but it, you know, it's a wonderfully interesting way of looking at machine learning to look at project delivery, you know, baselines and whatnot. You know, you extrapolate that and you look at the implications of different variables as you've described. So climate, supply chain availability and resilience, availability of funding could be another one, ground conditions. You know, you can start feeding all of these things in. And you can get feeds from the Met Office that come in to advise about future scenarios for climate and for weather in the short and longer term. You can get you know, real-time feedback from asset suppliers for things like speedy hire and whatnot. You know, provide that in terms of data points. You plug them all in, and it's a basic logic model that starts to look at what the scenarios are as they pan out. It doesn't exist yet, but that sort of multivariate model is basically it's the intentions of the National Digital Twin, is to help form what that logic model looks like. It's not to create the whole final project, but it's to make the logic work. And the demonstrator, and I completely forgot to mention it, there's a demonstrator project that Cambridge are looking to do, and it's looking to do something very similar. It's looking at the energy and water example and saying, okay, considering climate, considering the price of energy and the price of water, considering the likely scenarios of the availability of those natural resources and assets, people's demand profiles, you know, it's so many different multivariable aspects. Tell us what future investment scenarios might come out of it, or tell us what the impact on pricing or demand might look like. So we can be pretty ambitious with what we ask these models to do, and the same with project delivery too. I suppose it comes back to the cost-benefit argument is, you know, where you've got a fairly comfortable and locked down process already, is there a need to put something very complicated in there to manage it? And I don't know the answer to that. That's for a discussion separately, I think. But Laura is dead right in what she says that, my goodness, it's a drawn out response, isn't it? Is that you've got to, you know, the emulated twin, if you like, the real world implications form the baseline. If you use that baseline data to look at different scenarios and how they pan out, and it could be a Monte Carlo analysis that looks at tens of thousands of permutations, or it could be a man-made, you know, three-way split thing. That's still an application of a digital twin. You know, it's still there. It's still using real data.
And James, I completely agree with you, apart from it doesn't exist yet. Certainly in terms of construction, because that's exactly what we did with Bam Nuttall. We created a digital twin of a construction site. So, and funnily enough, of course, the very first thing they needed was the weather. But yes, we were bringing in data from different forms of equipment, from deliveries, from all sorts of things. But it's not just about staring at the data for the love of data. It's about surfacing those significant events. And that's what digital twins enable you to do. So things like, you know, the cranes can't operate at a certain wind speed. Therefore, it's really great to have the weather forecast, because then you can pre-plan and go, okay, right, in 6 hours, we won't be able to use the cranes, everybody, so let's do something else instead. But also to have that now. So now it is too windy. The data has made the decision. It's no one's fault. The data is telling us this. Therefore, we have to stop work on cranes. Exactly. You know, these things are available, and this is what we're working on. And you mentioned energy and water, and those are exactly the areas where IOTIX is working now.
And we were very grateful for your response to the to the consultation as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, it'd be wonderful to get, Sophie, that case study maybe pulled out a little bit. So I wonder if I can ask you to send through any details you got on that. That would be fantastic, because I can share that with the other guys back at.
So yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So there's a question from Alessandro here, and he says, "Is BIM in design?" Oh, I've just
sorry. I stopped sharing the screen. I thought it was better. Yeah, sorry.
I read it out then, and it's moved on to a different screen. So,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's no problem. So if you go to the chat, right, there's some questions in there. We can sort of whiz through them now if you want.
Yeah.
So there's Alessandro's question about, is BIM in design and construction phases an essential part to enable a digital twin?
Wonderful. Oh, that's a perfectly timed. And I see there's another one in there. It says from Alex, who said, what research is being conducted to integrate BIM with the NDT? So both seem like they're addressing a similar thing. So we are actually running a project at the moment within the NDT called BIMF to INF. It's a lovely word, isn't it? So the BIM framework to the information management framework, what does the relationship look like? And rather than being a replacement for it, or supplanting what BIM was, there are connective relationships that sit between BIM and the IMF, and some of it will be an evolution of BIM, things like contract models and risk allocations and even some technologies. But there are some areas where BIM is just a better thing for early stage life cycle phases. So in construction and delivery, for example, and commissioning. And then the NDT side of things, the IMF picks up after that about how the data gets shared. So we don't know is the short version to that, but the conclusion of the roundtable series that we've been running is in 2 weeks' time. And we'll be putting the results of that out for open access through CDBB's website and the Digital Twin Hub. So I'd welcome all of your inputs into that, but it's definitely something we're very mindful of, and we've been working a lot with BIM councils, BIM for Water, construction leadership, and all the rest of those guys, including AMRC actually from the manufacturing side of things, to figure out what the answers to that might look like.
That's cool. Thank you.
No problem.
There's a question from Julian as well about repeated references to making data open. Now, there are massive security risks related to this, but it still needs security-minded approaches.
Yeah. So so I've spent a lot of time in nuclear, and nothing quite makes people run for the hills than saying open data when it comes to the nuclear regulator. So we're very mindful of that, and we don't have the answers yet to how that looks. And open is a spectrum, right? So it's not that everyone's got access to everything. There are different privileges and controls over the way that data aggregates that we need to be mindful of, and there are clever ways we can do that. But that needs to be fully in cognizant and in alignment and lockstep with CPNI, with GCHQ, even from the international perspective, and with Whitehall. So there's a lot of sort of political and security center interaction that needs to go on before we can answer that question. But again, the NDT is only supposed to be giving you confidence in the process and the tools to be able to check and govern and control that process. We won't be aggregating data. We're just going to create the tools to do so. The question then comes well, who's responsible for it then? Who governs it? And it may well be that we need a new regulator that oversees that, or it may well be that it's a joint cross-industrial private and public sector partnership that brings together lots of members together to govern it in consistencies. We ran a legal roundtable recently. We like roundtables, where those sort of questions were posed, and we had a lot of really interesting responses back from legal firms suggesting models that might work. So we'll be exploring those again in the coming 12 months. But totally current problem. You're dead right.
Cool. It's a question from Nameen as well about government projects. So are they going to lead the building that of that digital twin in an integrated and coordinated manner?
I mean, the government guys. Sorry, say again, Martin.
So are they going to start to specify this in contracts? If you want to win a job, you get sort of more points. If you say, I'm going to contribute to the digital twin, I'm going to build this thing out. Is that going to come? Do you think that's likely?
I think you may have already seen it start. So Highways England put out a tender recently, which some of you may have seen already, which looked at a digital twin policy document that needed writing up for them. And within it was one of the key criteria was thou shalt know about the information management framework from the Centre for Digital Build Britain. So those sort of things are starting to percolate through, but at the moment there is no mandate, there is no expectation yet that that happens, because we don't have the IMF ready. As we get to the point where the IMF is mature and looks like something which we will start to ask for compliance for, then it's really to those, again, it's to the asset owners, whether they're government companies or private sector ones, about whether they've committed themselves to that information management framework. And if they have, then they'll likely put that into their contractual requirements for project delivery.
Cool. It's great, thank you. There's a question from Sundeep about all the legal implications of this. So who's responsible for the quality of the data, quality of the algorithm, interoperability between data sets? I presume that's one of your work streams, is it?
Most definitely, yeah. As I say, the legal implications are massive, and we've been lucky that we've managed to secure. I think Rachel, I think you're on the call. Was it 12 law firms we had around the table? She might be quiet, eating a dinner. I think it was 12.
It was 8. Sorry, 8. I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, right. 8 is still pretty good, and we got senior partners from all of those guys come in and help us out. So governance was like the central theme to a lot of the recommendations that came out from the area that needed the most work. Is how do you own and govern something like that with such national coverage and aspirations? Doesn't matter how thin it is in terms of its depth, and even if it is just protocols, rules, and standards, somebody needs to own it, or some cohesive body needs to own it, whether that's multi-partite or single-partite. I'm sorry, I'm not coming to you with any answers for this. I'm just recognizing that it is a problem and we're doing something about it.
Cool. Yeah, good. Yeah, I think, it's just fleshing out that we all need to work together, all leverage each other's parts of the jigsaw in this, and make sure that somebody's mapped out the jigsaw lid. And that's what we're trying to do as part of the task force activity, the Project Data Analytics Task Force. As you said, what does our bit of the jigsaw lid look like, and what's the bit sticking out so we can connect with somebody else's jigsaw?
Yeah.
And I think we need to flesh that out this year. So I don't think there's any more questions in chat. If anybody wants to come off mute and ask James a question, then please feel free to do so. So we'll have a few minutes, see if anyone wants to come off mute. And we'll open the floor, James. So just imagine we're around the bar now in a physical environment. COVID's all finished. James is on his 4th pint, and here we go. So,
I pretend I'm 6'4". I'm very well built.
So anybody got any questions? Please don't be shy. Just come off mute. So James, if there's no questions coming through.
Question from me, James, if that's all right.
Of course.
I'm wondering around how long you see this taking. So you showed your slide with sort of 100 years in the future, we've got the AI planets and etc. Where along that time scale do you see sort of the national digital twin being?
Would you mind, Martin, if I just very quickly share the screen? I have a backup slide for this, for Tristan's comment. So I'll just very quickly back open. Let's try and get through that. That's boring stuff. There we go. Roadmap. So this is the roadmap we think we need to take to end up with an information management framework and the national digital twin. We are currently around the end of task 2 and 3. So we're just at the point where we're creating a prototype and hopefully a demonstrator and transformation engine in the next year. So you can see, we've been at it for 18 months now, 2 years. And we've got about that long. So if you were to extrapolate broadly linearly, you're looking at 2025, 2024 is when we're looking at dissemination and next steps. It may be earlier. It depends on the level of support we get from government in future years. Spending reviews are fickle. But fundamentally, it's a multi-year task that lies ahead of us.
Well, that's just for your bit, though, is it? Not necessarily that we've got a fully integrated, all singing, all dancing national digital twin.
Exactly. Yeah. At that point, we've got the tools to make it happen. What we can't do is force, what we don't want to do is force people to use it. So it's about uptake in the right places, in the right areas. So what might hopefully, uptake starts to happen around task 8, task 9, where we've got the IMF's fundamental components, the demonstrators, the query engines, the mapping exercising, all that sort of stuff, that's all working. People can start to use it in some sort of anger then. We might still have some journeys to make in terms of enabling the environment for people to successfully start sharing data, but basically the core is there. So we'll see uptake start to happen, I would imagine from the back end of next year, maybe even next year. And then it's just a matter of growth and scale and pace. And that'll be market-led rather than us.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else want to come off mute? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Lou. Yes, please, Martin.
You go for it, Steve, and then Ken afterwards.
Cool, thank you. Thanks, James. That's a really good presentation there. I was just wondering what your views are on what the UK is up to compared to what might be going on in other parts of the world, and how different that could be, and how difficult that might actually make business downstream.
Yeah. Or you guys keep asking me questions I want to talk for hours about. So we are engaging currently with a lot of international players who want to do some things very similar. So if I disregard just digital twins and talk about national digital twin programs, Australia and Singapore, New Zealand, believe it or not, Estonia, are all pretty advanced in terms of their national digital twin programs. South Korea is doing something which looks very similar, but focusing more on geospatial data. And then we've got North America, who's sort of gone through a bit of a pain barrier already. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Sidewalk Labs project. If not, that's an interesting Google exercise for you. It's digital twins done poorly, Sidewalk Labs. The ROI didn't quite work out. So there's lots of lessons to learn, but be under no illusion that this is a competitive advantage play for UK PLC, in that a national digital twin helps with its economic value, but it's also export potential in the future as well, in terms of skills and product. So there is a race to, whether it's spelt out or not, whether it's real or not, I don't know, but there should be a race to make that capability happen here first. And at the moment, without wanting to indulge in hubris, we appear to be the most advanced of any developed nation at the moment. In fact, of any nation in terms of our thinking. There are others who've taken a more commercial play on what a national digital twin should look like. So it's more about generating money quickly for people. But what it doesn't do is generate societal impact. So if you consider that, I think we're doing a pretty good job of balancing altruism versus economic gain. It will be a challenge going forward, and there will be competitive plays made. And again, when you look at the openness of data, what do you do with a multinational company? So if you've got somebody like Vestas, who operates in the UK but is Spanish owned, I think, or Siemens, who are headquartered over in Germany but operate internationally, and Siemens, in a good example, actually operate wind turbines that sit in international waters. So they might be UK operated, but actually the data goes into international data centers and gets moved around. How does the national digital twin deal with that? There's a security and national imperative problem there too. So there's a few fronts on the international front we've got to deal with. And again, no full solutions yet, but plans to solve.
Cool. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Should I get my camera on? A friend of mine worked for a company called Platts, and they publish the price of oil and gas. And then he went to work for a company that had satellite information about the emissions, the live emissions of the chemical plants, temperatures of operating units, and they could tell you that a plant had an emergency shutdown, and you should quickly buy the product of that plant before it got announced to the market. And so that company has a digital twin of all the world's petrochemical plants to some degree. It's not, it doesn't have a live feed from the plants, but it has a remote view from the sky of them. And the other one is that as Equinor gave us this data set, can you talk to all of the UK infrastructure organizations to produce and release their historical data so that we can do the modeling on it, and then can work with all this old data and get our models working so that they predict the outcomes that actually happened, like just counting the number of vehicles going across a bridge, and you know the bridge is going to fail, or you're going to get potholes at the minimum. How much water is flown through a pipe in London would give you an idea of when that pipe's going to burst and have a leak. But those are just my 2 penny worth. Thank you.
And they're perfect, you know, ideal case studies for it. And one of the leading sectors for doing that, for indulging in openness and, you know, access to data is the energy sector, of which we've got quite a few guys here, I think, today, haven't we? When I say energy, I'll pick specifically on the electricity transmission and distribution and the operating markets, you know, the supply market. So Ofgem, our UK regulator for that, has been pretty explicit, saying you must open up these data sources that you're all holding, guys, because we all need to share together, and the consumer needs to know what's going on. And more than that, actually, they're really excited about the idea of a secondary marketplace that springs up when people can use that open data to create new business models. So they said, look, all the regulated utilities, you must open up your doors and share at least a subset of this data. And I'm fortunate enough to sit on a working group which is looking at how they're starting to do that. And it's a bit ungainly because there's a lot of APIs being used, there's a lot of sort of intermediaries about how that data gets brokered. But fundamentally, you know, you can now see an awful lot of data that's coming from EDF or National Grid or, you know, or ExoServe for the gas side of things. And you, as an individual, you can now go and find a way to download that, or you can request it and you'll be granted access to a live stream of data, which might be updated, you know, on fairly long temporal bases, but fundamentally it's open access data. What you do with that, how you repackage it, how you commercialize it, how you might sell it on, it's up to you. It's entirely up to you. There's no caveats or restrictions placed on it from what I can understand. So it's really interesting stuff popping up. And I've seen a lot of new business models based on just that taking open access data, adding value to it by coming up with some conclusions or so what's about it, and then creating a service from it. Great, fantastic. If that's what open data can do for us, that's more economic value. And your examples were dead on the money. Not sure about the ethical side of things about advanced trading notices, but hey, send me the link.
I can charge my battery and then sell a bit electricity back when it's more expensive.
Yeah, completely the case. Yeah.
And but I would also ask about the historical data, not just the live feed, but if we can have access to the historical data, which Martin has probed in some markets, then we have this data that we can work with, because waiting for live data when you can have waiting for an event to happen like a blizzard, when if you had 10 or 20 years worth of real data, then you could start to model things and try them out, both physical events like the road surface failures or the train tracks being too icy, when you need to spread salt on the road because of the temperature forecast. There's a lot of other things like that. When a ferry should run or not run because the weather is the sea state's going to get too bad.
But no, very much so. I mean, that takes it slightly out of the realms of digital twin territory, but it's still it's regressive forecasting basically. But it's still based on the real data set, and that's great. And Met Office is fantastic for that. You know, that they make available a huge amount of historical data to look at forecasting, so that we can do better judgments on what climate change might do to us. Although with Met Office, I think you've got to pay about $5,000 to get access to it, so it's not a low barrier.
It's worth pointing out that in project delivery, we are dinosaurs at this. So we've been sniffing out data across the world, and the best data we've found at the moment is itdashboard.gov, which is an American data set of their project performance data on every single bit of ICT spend in a sort of American government. And they break it all down and they put loads and loads of data in the public domain. And the same for the Victorian government in Australia. So they do the same. And you look at the UK, and we publish a report, which is the Government Major Projects Portfolio Report.
Yeah.
It's published 6 months late because all that data comes together, it all gets aggregated, it gets back and checked again, and somebody produces the report, it gets kicked back, it gets wordsmithed, etc. So there's a massive lag on it. So we're dinosaurs compared to some people who's leading this. So if you look at the National Digital Twin, you might be a lead in the world. If you look at project data analytics, we're far short, and we could be really smashing this, right? We've got some really cool players in the UK. So there's Sophie's stuff, there's Nplan, there's Nodes and Links, right? We've got some really good players, but we need to just change our vision and our appetite and, you know, the passion for what we can do. It's massive. It's really, really is massive. And that's what we're trying to do through the task force, really, is to shake some trees and say, let's wake up to this stuff.
Totally agree. And the more that we've got in terms of a reserve of open data or even regressive data that we can draw upon, the better. But you're right, our benchmarking in the UK is woeful when compared to others, and it's really annoying, you know, that we've not got that open access to it. Maybe just taking us back to that national infrastructure strategy recommendation that there was it wasn't a recommendation, it was policy to launch this new cost benchmarking hub and data platform. I don't know what that is yet. I feel like I definitely need to learn more about it. But I'm hoping that forms the basis of just that. So it's the start of a place where some baseline data can gather, and then we can extract that, and projecting success can tap into it, use it, come up with the so whats and the what ifs, and, you know, and then apply it. But it seems so odd that it's taken us this long to figure out that was required.
Yeah.
At a government level, you know, you guys have seen it for a while, but government just haven't got their head around it.
And even that, it's not bold enough. So the oil and gas community has been doing that for 20, 30 years in terms of benchmarking.
Yeah.
Independent project analysis performance forums been doing it for years. Where we need to be is not just a cost data set. It's looking at the connections between the cost, the scope of work, the sort of sector you're working in. You need to look at the schedule, what the impacts are, etc. And it's like a digital twin, right? It's an integrated model of all of that data set. We need to just leapfrog going through benchmarking and just get straight into the real top end stuff.
Yeah.
Now, otherwise we've lost 5 years just working up a benchmarking data set, and we could make it so much better.
Indeed.
So any more questions from anybody? If not, it's 3 to 8.
Hello?
Last chance, one more question.
Can you hear me?
I can hear a very, very quiet voice, but I don't know who it's from.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just. If you speak a little bit.
Yep. Is it okay now?
Yes, that's better.
Yeah, we got
okay.
Tom.
Yes. Well, it's Dr. Popov, but yeah, it's I didn't manage to change the name on the Zoom. So anyway, James, I had a question regarding the tools of the initiative. So are you planning to kind of develop the tools on your own, or you're looking at domestic and international kind of companies that can provide parts of the whole systems that you're kind of envisioning? How are you kind of going to proceed on that front?
It is a good question. It's not going to be internally delivered. So the internal team that we've got, you know, the technology concept, if you like, the architecture is what we'll be designing. We won't be developing the tools or the front ends or the integration architecture that underpins it. That will be a marketplace sourced outcome. And in fact, almost I'd say 90% of what we do in the program is done through commercial partnerships and commercial suppliers. So if you're interested in looking to what CDBB is going to be contracting, by all means get in touch and have a chat. We're still pretty much in the not academic, but it's the sort of thought development process area, and a lot of the contractual engagement will happen in next year. Certainly for the demonstrator we're doing, yeah, then that's probably the best I can tell you at this stage. Is that yes, we will be using market participants to do it, but I don't quite know what that looks like yet.
Cool.
Okay, thanks very much.